I don't
Hi,
care
my
what you
beautiful
think, this is
family.
over.
Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories today.
Please,
I bring
don't
you a
leave me
powerful
like this.
and deeply loving story, Asterisk. The digital clock glowed to 14 a.m. when
I don't care
Holofera
what you
Queen
think,
felt the
this is
first real
over.
contraction tear through her body. She had been ignoring the
Please, don't
discomfort
leave
for
me like
hours,
this.
convincing herself it was just another false alarm. At 8 months pregnant, her body had played tricks on her before.
I don't
But
care
this
what
pain
you
was
think, this is
different.
over.
This pain demanded attention. She
Please,
reached across
don't
the
leave
empty
me
bed,
like this.
her hand finding only cold sheets where her husband should have been. Byron Lawson had left hours ago, promising it was just a quick business dinner with potential investors for his restaurant chain. That was at 7 in the evening. Now, past 2 in the morning, he still had not returned. Holofera pushed herself up, breathing through another wave of pain. The bedroom felt too quiet, too empty. Baby clothes sat folded on the dresser, waiting. The hospital bag stood packed by the door, prepared for this exact moment. Everything was ready, except the one person who had promised to be there. She grabbed her phone with trembling fingers and dialed Byron's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. This time, the call connected, and she heard music pounding in the background, loud laughter, the clink of glasses. A woman's voice too close to the phone giggled about something. Byron Holofera managed to say, her voice tight with pain, "Byron, I need you. The baby is coming." But the line went dead. Whether he hung up or the connection dropped, she could not tell. Either way, she was alone. Another contraction hit, stronger than before, and Holofera doubled over, gripping the edge of the nightstand. Sweat beaded on her forehead. This was really happening. Her daughter was coming tonight, and she had no one. She tried calling her sister Patricia, but it went straight to voicemail. Patricia lived 2 hours away and had mentioned something about a work conference. Her mother Diane was visiting relatives in another state. The realization of her isolation crashed over her like a wave. Panic clawed at her throat. She needed help. She needed someone, anyone. With shaking hands, she opened her messages and began typing frantically. Emergency. In labor. Need help now. Come quick. She meant to send it to Byron to try one more time to reach the man who should have been there. But in her pain and panic, her fingers slipped. The message went to the wrong contact. She did not notice. She dropped the phone on the bed and focused on breathing, counting, trying to remember everything from the childbirth classes Byron had skipped. 15 minutes passed like hours. Then her phone buzzed. She grabbed it, expecting Byron's excuses. Instead, she saw a name that made her heart stop. Julian West. Dress now. On my way. Julian West was Byron's business partner, the silent investor who had helped fund the restaurant expansion. Holofera had met him only 3 times, always briefly, always formally. He was the opposite of Byron in every way. Quiet where Byron was loud. Thoughtful where Byron was impulsive. Present where Byron was absent. She stared at the message, her mind struggling to process through the pain. She had sent the emergency text to Julian by mistake, but another contraction ripped through her, and pride became irrelevant. She needed help, and help was offering to come. Her fingers moved automatically, typing out her address. 20 minutes later, headlights cut through the darkness outside her window. Holofera had managed to get dressed, barely, in loose sweatpants and an oversized shirt. She clutched the hospital bag and leaned against the wall as another contraction seized her body. The doorbell rang. Then knocking, urgent but controlled. "Holofera, it is Julian." "Open up." She stumbled to the door, unlocked it, and nearly fell into his arms as it swung open. Julian West stood there in jeans and a wrinkled shirt, his dark hair messy as if he had just rolled out of bed. His gray eyes, usually so calm and measured, were wide with concern. "How far apart are the contractions?" he asked, immediately steadying her with strong hands on her shoulders. 5 minutes, she gasped. Maybe less now. He did not waste time with questions about Byron or explanations. He simply took the hospital bag from her trembling hands, wrapped his arm around her waist to support her weight, and guided her toward his car parked at the curb. A sleek black sedan, expensive but understated, just like its owner. The drive to the hospital blurred together. Holofera remembered Julian's steady voice telling her to breathe, remembered his hand reaching back to squeeze hers when a particularly bad contraction hit at a red light. She remembered thinking that this man, practically a stranger, was doing what her husband should have done. At the emergency entrance, Julian moved with surprising efficiency. He got her into a wheelchair, spoke rapidly to the nurses, handled paperwork while Holofera was wheeled into triage. When a nurse asked if he was the father, he did not correct her. He simply said, "I am here for her." The labor room was bright and clinical. Monitors beeped, tracking her contractions, the baby's heartbeat. Holofera gripped the bed rails, trying to be strong, trying not to think about Byron's absence. A different nurse came in, checked her progress, and announced she was already 7 centimeters dilated. "It is going to be fast," the nurse said with an encouraging smile. "Your baby is eager to meet you." Julian stood near the door, uncertain, clearly out of his element. But when Holofera reached out her hand, desperate for something to hold on to, he crossed the room without hesitation. His hand wrapped around hers, large and warm and solid. "I am sorry," she whispered between contractions. "You should not have to be here. This is not your responsibility." His jaw tightened. "Where is Byron?" She could not answer. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from physical pain, but from the crushing weight of abandonment. "You do not have to do this alone," Julian said quietly. "I am staying." And he did. Through every contraction, every push, every moment of doubt when Holofera thought she could not do it, Julian West was there. He did not look away when things got difficult. He did not check his phone or make excuses. He held her hand and told her she was strong, told her she could do this, believed in her when she could not believe in herself. At 6:47 a.m., as dawn light began filtering through the hospital window, Sienna Rose Queen came into the world. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfect crying, beautiful life. The nurse placed the baby on Holofera's chest, and the world stopped. Nothing else mattered. Not Byron, not the pain, not the confusion of the night. Just this tiny human, her daughter. Warm and real, and here. Holofera looked up through tears of joy and exhaustion to find Julian standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his expression soft in a way she had never seen before. There was wonder in his eyes and something else she could not name. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for being here," he nodded, his throat working as if he wanted to say something but could not find the words. Finally he managed, "She's beautiful, Holofera. You did amazing," as the nurses bustled around, cleaning up, checking vitals, preparing to move them to a recovery room. Holofera held her daughter and felt the first stirrings of a truth she was not ready to face. The man who should have been there had abandoned her, and the man who had no obligation at all had shown up without question. Her phone, forgotten in her bag, held 17 missed calls from Byron. But by then it was far too late. Some moments, once missed, could never be recovered. Some absences could never be forgiven. Julian stayed until visiting hours officially started. He left only when Patricia arrived, frantic and apologetic after finally seeing the messages. Before he walked out, he paused at the door and looked back at Holofera, holding her newborn daughter. "If you need anything," he said simply, "anything at all, call me." Then he was gone, leaving Holofera to wonder how everything in her life had changed in one single night. The wrong message sent to the wrong person had somehow become the exact right thing at the exact right moment. Outside the window, the city woke up to a new day. Inside the hospital room, Holofera Queen began the hardest and most important journey of her life, learning how to stand on her own. The taxi pulled up to the apartment building 4 days later, and Holofera felt her stomach twist with anxiety. Patricia helped her out of the car while the driver retrieved the hospital bag and baby carrier. Sienna slept peacefully, unaware of the tension radiating from her mother. Holofera had tried calling Byron twice from the hospital. The first time, he answered with slurred words and hollow apologies. The second time, he did not pick up at all. He never came to the hospital, never met his daughter, never explained where he had been that night or why her emergency meant so little to him. The apartment door was unlocked. Holofera pushed it open slowly, half expecting to find Byron passed out on the couch or stumbling around with excuses ready. Instead, she found silence. An empty, horrible silence that filled every corner of the space. Patricia stepped inside first, her eyes scanning the room. "Holofera, wait." But Holofera was already moving forward, carrying Sienna in her arms. The living room looked wrong. The bookshelf that used to hold Byron's collection of cooking magazines stood bare. The leather jacket he always left, draped over the armchair, was gone. Even the framed photo of their wedding day had vanished from the mantel. She walked faster now, her heart pounding. The bedroom door stood open. Half the closet was empty. Drawers hung open, cleared of their contents. On the dresser, where Byron kept his watch collection, there was only dust and a single envelope with her name written in his careless scrawl. Patricia took Sienna gently from her arms. "Sit down. Let me read it first." "No." Holofera snatched the envelope, her hands shaking. She tore it open, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and read the words that would change everything. "Holofera, I cannot do this. I am not ready to be a father. I am not ready for this kind of responsibility. The restaurant needs my full attention, and I need space to figure out who I am. You will be better off without me dragging you down. Take care of yourself and the baby. Byron." The paper slipped from her fingers and floated to the floor. Holofera stood frozen, her mind unable to process the cruelty of those words. Not an apology, not even guilt. Just Byron, once again making everything about himself. Patricia wrapped her arms around her sister. And finally, Holofera broke. She sobbed into Patricia's shoulder, great heaving cries that came from somewhere deep and raw. All the pain of the labor, all the fear of doing this alone, all the betrayal of a man who promised forever and delivered nothing. "He left us," she whispered. "He actually left us." The days that followed were a blur of survival. Patricia stayed for 2 weeks, helping with midnight feedings and diaper changes, teaching Holofera the basics of newborn care that she was supposed to learn alongside a partner. Their mother, Diane, cut her trip short and arrived with casseroles and fierce protectiveness. Alternating between comforting her daughter and cursing Byron's name, money became an immediate problem. Holofera had left her marketing job 6 months into the pregnancy when Byron insisted she should focus on preparing for the baby. He promised his restaurants were doing well, that they had plenty saved. Another lie. The joint account held barely enough for 2 months of rent and expenses. She applied for every remote job she could find. But companies were not eager to hire a woman with a newborn and a resume gap. Rejections piled up. Anxiety turned into panic. How would she feed her daughter? How would she keep a roof over their heads? 3 weeks after coming home, her phone rang. Julian West's name appeared on the screen. "Hello?" Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears.
Hello, Farah?
"How are you managing?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly broke her composure. "I am managing." Pause. "I need someone to handle social media consulting for my tech company. Our current contractor is moving to Europe. It is remote work, flexible hours. The pay is competitive. Would you be interested?" Pride made her want to refuse. But Sienna was crying in the next room, and the bills on the counter were stamped with red warnings. "Yes, I would be very interested." "Good, I will send over the contract details." "Holofera, this is not charity. I have seen your previous work. You are qualified." Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe it was charity disguised as opportunity. Either way, she could not afford to refuse. "Thank you, Julian." The work was challenging, but rewarding. Holofera threw herself into creating content strategies, managing multiple social platforms, analyzing engagement metrics. She worked during Sienna's naps, late into the nights after the baby finally slept. Slowly, her confidence began to rebuild. She was good at this. She had forgotten how good. Julian checked in weekly, always professional, but kind. Sometimes he would ask about Sienna. Holofera found herself sharing small stories. The first smile. The way her daughter's eyes were starting to change color. He listened like it mattered. 2 months passed. Holofera secured 2 additional clients through referrals from Julian's network. The money was not abundant, but it was enough. She could breathe again. She could see a future that did not involve depending on anyone. Then Byron reappeared. She was carrying groceries up to the apartment. Sienna strapped to her chest in a baby carrier when she heard his voice behind her. "Holofera." She turned slowly. Byron stood by a beat-up car she did not recognize, his hair longer and unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who had been running and finally realized he had nowhere left to go. What do you want? Her voice came out colder than she intended. He stepped closer. I want to see my daughter. You left her? You left us both. I made a mistake. His voice cracked. I was scared, and I ran. But I have been thinking about you both every day. Holofera shifted the grocery bags. You have been drinking. I can smell it from here. Just a couple beers. That is not the point. His tone shifted, becoming aggressive. The point is that people are talking. Saying you moved on real fast. Saying Julian West is always around. Her blood went cold. What are you talking about? You think I do not hear things? You think people do not tell me that my wife is spending time with my business partner? That he was there when my daughter was born? He was there because you were not. He helped me because I had no one else. Aaron's face twisted with anger and something uglier, jealousy. You are using him. Using his money, his connections. How long before you end up in his bed? The accusation hit like a slap. Holofera felt rage rise in her chest, hot and righteous. Get away from me. You have no right to say those things. No right to judge how I survive after you abandoned us. I am still your husband, on paper only. You stopped being my husband the night you ignored my calls and left me to give birth alone. She pushed past him toward the building entrance. Do not contact me again unless it is through a lawyer. She did not look back, even when he called her name. She climbed the stairs, got inside the apartment, locked the door, and finally let herself shake. Sienna, oblivious to the confrontation, cooed happily against her chest. But Byron's words had planted poison. Over the next week, Holofera noticed the stares from neighbors, whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Someone had been spreading rumors. Whether it was Byron or just cruel gossip, the damage was spreading. Then Julian called with news that made everything worse. Someone tried to sell confidential information about our upcoming product launch. The buyer recorded the conversation. It was Byron. Holofera sat down heavily. What? He approached 3 of our competitors. Offered to sell customer data, development plans, financial projections. He was trying to sabotage the company. Julian's voice was tight with controlled anger. I have reported it to the authorities. I wanted you to know before it becomes public. As she closed her eyes. He is trying to hurt you because of me. No, Holofera. He is hurting everyone because he is desperate and bitter. This is not your fault. But guilt gnawed at her anyway. Byron was lashing out, and everyone around her was getting caught in the crossfire. She spent that night staring at the ceiling, wondering if she should have handled things differently. She had somehow caused the spiral. The next morning, Patricia called with fire in her voice. I heard what he is saying about you downtown. I am coming over, and we are going to figure out how to shut this down. Patricia, I do not want to make it worse. It is already worse. Now, we fight back. 2 days later, the news broke. Byron Lawson had been arrested for attempted corporate espionage and theft of proprietary information. The story made local business headlines. Holofera's phone exploded with messages from people she had not heard from in months. Some offering support, others fishing for gossip. She ignored them all and focused on Sienna. Fed her, changed her, sang to her, and promised silently that her daughter would never know a father's love as conditional and cruel as Byron's had been. Julian came by that evening. The first time he had visited the apartment since the hospital, he brought takeout and a tired smile. Thought you might not feel like cooking. They ate in comfortable silence while Sienna slept nearby. Finally, Holofera said what had been weighing on her. I am sorry he tried to hurt your company. I am sorry you got dragged into my mess. Julian set down his fork and looked at her directly. You did not drag me anywhere. I chose to help you that night, and I have chosen to be in your life since then. Byron's choices are his own. Do not carry his guilt. People think there is something between us, is there? The question hung in the air, gentle but direct. Holofera met his eyes. I do not know what there is. I know I am grateful. I know you have been kinder to me than I deserve. But I am still married, still broken, still figuring out how to be a mother. I do not have room for anything else right now. Julian nodded slowly. That is fair. When you are ready, if you are ever ready, I will be here. And if you are never ready, I will still be here as your friend. No pressure. No expectations. It was the exact right thing to say. Holofera felt something loosen in her chest, some fear she had been carrying without naming. Thank you for understanding. He He stayed another hour, helping clean up, making her laugh with stories about disastrous business meetings. When he left, the apartment felt less empty than it had in weeks. That night, holding Sienna close, Halafira realized something important. She had been so focused on what Byron took from her that she had not noticed what remained. She had her daughter. She had her family. She had work she was proud of. She had rebuilt herself from nothing into something stronger. Byron's arrest was not the end of her story. It was barely even a chapter. The real story was just beginning, and for the first time since that terrible night, Halafira felt ready to write it herself. The courtroom was smaller than Halafira expected. She sat in the back row, Sienna sleeping in her carrier, and watched as Byron stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than the man who had once filled her whole world. The charges were read: corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, attempted fraud. Julian sat 3 rows ahead with his legal team, his posture rigid. When Byron's lawyer tried to argue for leniency, claiming emotional distress and poor judgment, Julian's attorney presented recorded phone calls, email evidence, and testimony from the competitors Byron had approached. The case was airtight. Byron had been caught in the act, his greed and bitterness documented in his own words. The judge showed no sympathy. 18 months in minimum security prison, followed by probation and restitution payments. As the bailiffs led Byron away, he turned, and his eyes found Halafira in the back of the room. She expected anger or defiance, but what she saw was emptiness. A man who had destroyed everything and gained nothing. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet sadness for the person he could have been. Outside the courthouse, Julian waited by his car. "You did not have to come. I needed to see it end," Halafira said. "Needed the closure, and do you have it?" She looked down at Sienna, awake now, and watching the world with curious eyes. "I am getting there." The months that followed brought unexpected peace. With Byron's criminal activity exposed, the rumors about Halafira evaporated. People who had whispered behind her back now offered embarrassed apologies. She accepted them with grace, but kept her distance. She had learned who stood by her when things were dark, and those were the relationships worth keeping. Her consulting business grew beyond anything she had imagined. What started with Julian's company and 2 small clients expanded to 8 steady contracts. She hired a part-time assistant, a college student named Grace, who needed flexible hours and had a gift for graphic design. Working from home with Sienna nearby, Halafira built something that was entirely hers. Patricia visited every weekend, bringing toys for her niece and wine for her sister. They would sit on the balcony after Sienna went to sleep, talking about everything and nothing. Their bond, already strong, had become unbreakable. Even Diane, who had been critical and distant for so many years, transformed into a devoted grandmother. She babysat twice a week, giving Halafira time to work uninterrupted. Once Halafira overheard her mother singing to Sienna, the same lullaby she had sung when Halafira was small. It brought tears to her eyes. "I was not a good mother to you," Diane said one afternoon, unprompted. "I was too hard, too focused on what I thought you should be. I am sorry." Halafira hugged her mother, feeling decades of tension finally release. "You are here now. That is what matters." Julian remained a steady presence, but he kept his word about not pushing for more. He stopped by occasionally, always with a good reason, dropping off a contract, bringing a toy he thought Sienna would like, asking advice on a marketing campaign. Their conversations were easy, comfortable. Halafira found herself looking forward to his visits, then feeling guilty about looking forward to them. "You are allowed to have feelings," Patricia said bluntly one night. "You are separated. Byron is in prison, and you are rebuilding your life. If Julian makes you happy, that is okay. It feels too soon. It has been almost a year, Halafira. And feelings do not follow timelines. They just are." Sienna's first birthday arrived with unexpected joy. The apartment filled with balloons and the people who mattered: Patricia, Diane, Grace, a few close friends, and Julian. Sienna, wearing a tiny crown, smashed her first piece of cake with enthusiastic glee. Getting frosting in her hair and on everyone nearby, Halafira watched her daughter laugh, surrounded by love, and felt something settled deep in her soul. This was enough. This was more than enough. She had built a life from ruins, created stability from chaos, found family in unexpected places. Later, after the guests left and Sienna was bathed and sleeping, Julian helped clean up. "She is amazing," he said, carefully stacking plates. "You are raising an incredible little human." "I had a lot of help. You did the hard part." "You kept going when it would have been easier to give up." He paused, then continued carefully. "I want you to know something. That night you sent me the message by mistake. It changed my life too." Halifera stopped wiping the counter. "What do you mean?" "I was living a half-life. Work, success, all the things that look good on paper, but nothing real. No connection. No purpose beyond profit margins. And then I got your message, and suddenly nothing else mattered except getting to you." He met her eyes. "You reminded me what is important. You and Sienna both." Her heart beat faster. "Julian, I care about you. More than I probably should. But I am scared. Scared of trusting again? Scared of making another mistake? No. I am not asking you to trust me completely right now. I am just asking if we can keep building what we have been building. Slowly, carefully. No rush." Halifera thought about the past year. The nights Julian stayed up on the phone, talking her through panic attacks. The way he celebrated every client she landed. How he always asked about Sienna first, work second. The quiet consistency of someone who showed up again and again with no expectation of reward. "I would like that," she said softly. The slow and careful part, he smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Then we have all the time in the world." Over the next 6 months, they took small steps. Coffee dates while Diane watched Sienna. Walks in the park with the stroller. Long conversations that stretched into evening. Julian never pushed, never demanded more than Halifera was ready to give. And slowly, carefully, she began to let down the walls. One evening, as they sat on her balcony watching the sunset, Julian asked, "What do you want for your future?" "Not for Sienna, not for work. For you," Halifera considered the question seriously. "I want to feel free. Really free. Not running from something or trying to prove I am okay. Just existing in a space where I am enough exactly as I am. You are enough. You have always been enough. I am starting to believe that." The divorce papers came through on a gray Tuesday morning. Halifera signed them in her kitchen while Sienna played with blocks on the floor. No ceremony, no drama. Just the legal end of something that had died long ago. She felt lighter immediately, as if a weight she had forgotten she was carrying had finally lifted. That weekend, Julian took her to dinner at a small Italian restaurant. No business talk, no discussions about clients or contracts. Just two people enjoying each other's company, laughing over pasta and wine. Stealing glances when they thought the other was not looking. "I have something to tell you," Julian said as they walked back to her building. "I am opening a second office across the country. It is a big expansion, and it means I will be traveling more for the next year." Halifera's stomach dropped. "Oh, but I want you to know, nothing changes between us. I am not going anywhere. I will still be here for you and Sienna. If you want me to be," relief flooded through her. "I want you to be, both of us do." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Can I kiss you? I have wanted to for months, but I needed you to be ready." Halifera's answer was to stand on her toes and close the distance between them. The kiss was gentle, tentative, full of promise rather than passion. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "I am ready," she whispered. "Not for everything all at once, but ready to try." Back in her apartment, she checked on Sienna, sleeping peacefully with her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Halifera sat on the edge of the bed and traced her daughter's features. Byron's nose, her own eyes. A perfect combination of two people who could not make it work. But Sienna would grow up knowing what real love looked like. She would see her mother build a business, stand on her own feet, and choose happiness after heartbreak. She would be surrounded by people who showed up, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The wrong message sent in a moment of desperation had led to Julian. The abandonment by a husband led to independence. The rumors and scandal led to clarity about what truly mattered. Every terrible thing had somehow pointed toward something better. Halifera did not know what the future held. Maybe she and Julian would build something lasting. Maybe they would discover they were better as friends. Maybe new challenges would emerge that she could not yet imagine. But standing in her daughter's room, in the apartment she had turned into a home, with a business she had built and relationships she had chosen, Halafera finally understood something important. She did not need to know what came next. She had survived the worst night of her life and turned it into a beginning rather than an ending. She had learned to ask for help, to accept support, to believe in her own worth. Most importantly, she had learned that being broken was not the same as being defeated. The sun rose on another day. Sienna would wake soon, demanding breakfast and attention and all the chaotic love a toddler brings. There was work to do, bills to pay, a life to continue building. But for this moment, Halafera simply stood in the peaceful quiet and felt something she had not felt in years. Gratitude, not for the pain, but for surviving it. Not for Byron leaving, but for discovering who she was without him. Not for the struggles, but for the strength they revealed. She whispered into the darkness. Thank you for the wrong number. Thank you for the help that came from nowhere. Thank you for teaching me I was never as alone as I thought. And somewhere in the city, perhaps Julian was thinking the same thing? That a panicked message sent to the wrong person had become the exact right thing for two people who needed to find their way. The story that began with abandonment ended with choice. And in that choice, Halafera Queen found exactly what she had been searching for all along herself. Thank you for taking Thed time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more and meaningful stories.